My son CJ, 4, appears to have an entity bothering him. He calls him his fake dad, creepily enough. He's mentioned him for a while now, but anytime that we ask questions about fake dad, he usually changes the subject. At first, we laughed about it, thinking it was a strange name for an imaginary friend, but I'm starting to think that may not be the case. You see, recently it's been escalating. Last week, CJ told us that he used to have a fake mum, but she drowned in the ocean. Creepy, but we were driving back from the beach at the time. We asked if fake dad was with us, and he said no, and that he didn't really want to talk about fake dad. Tonight, my husband and I were eating dinner after CJ had gotten up to play, and we heard him say to himself, "Ouch, that was a bad idea. I should have never listened to him." We asked him what he meant, and he told us that fake dad had told him to walk across his new train track, his new birthday present that he loves. CJ told us that fake dad always tells him to do bad things like break his toys. He hasn't done this yet, but tonight was the first time he really opened up about fake dad. He also told us that fake dad gets mad when he hugs his real dad. He was pretty upset and told us that he doesn't like fake dad and wishes that he would leave him alone. As I'm sharing this, CJ started crying from his bedroom as well. I went to check on him, thinking that he was messing around and hurt himself or something, but the lights were still off and he had fallen off of the bed, which he has never done before. He was confused about how it could have even happened as well. This is escalating quickly now, and I'm just wondering what kind of entity this is and how I can help my son. Also, last night we heard a loud bang coming from CJ's bedroom. I went to check on him, but the lights were off and I could see CJ in bed, and honestly it looked like he was asleep. I was standing in the doorway trying to figure out what had caused the noise when my husband walked up behind me. Suddenly, CJ sat up in bed and said, "He told me that you could come." I asked CJ who told him that, and he then pointed to the corner of the bedroom and said, "Fake dad." I looked to where he pointed, and I swear to you that I could see a silhouette of a very large man standing in the corner in the dark. My husband saw the same thing and quickly turned on the light, but when he did, nothing was there. Well, we packed some bags and we left for the night. I mean, there was no way that anyone was going to sleep in that house, and honestly, I'm not sure I ever want to even go back there. We're at my aunt's house now, and we're going to talk to her priest this afternoon to see what we can do. It just feels like I'm living in a horror movie. I mean, what the heck is this thing, and how can I get it to leave my child alone? This happened about 17 years ago during summer break. My friend and I, we went to visit another friend who was staying in this tiny remote village in Belarus for the summer. The house was his grandparents', and the whole place felt super isolated. Honestly, it was actually a lot of fun at first. We went swimming at a nearby lake every day, and at night we'd stay up late just sitting by the water and whatnot, listening to the kind of deafening silence that you only get in the countryside, and just talking for hours. During the day, we'd go mushroom picking, explore the area, take pictures, and just make some really good memories together. We stayed for a few weeks, but then one of my friends had to leave early because of some family stuff or something. The only way out was a bus that came twice a week, and she missed it. So she came back to our friend's place and asked if we could walk her to a nearby highway to try and hitch a ride. The main road was about 7 miles away, so we started walking. When we got there, it was midweek and no cars had passed at all. I guess most people were still at work in this city, and as it got later, we decided to just walk back in the end. On the way back, we passed through a few neighboring villages that were half abandoned. Honestly, it was a little bit creepy, but we kept ourselves entertained by singing and joking around to keep the fear at bay, I guess. It was getting dark though, and We still had about 4 miles left. Then we ended up on this road with dense forest on both sides. And suddenly, we started hearing noises coming from the trees. It was pitch dark and honestly pretty unsettling, so we tried to joke about it, but deep down we all felt something was a bit off. Then my friend pointed and we saw 2 huge yellow eyes staring at us from the trees. We just kept walking in silence for a bit until one of us nervously said, "Must be some wild fireflies messing with us or something, right?" We laughed, but we all knew that those definitely were not fireflies. Keep in mind too that this was before cell phones, so no way to call anyone. We just had to keep moving and get back safely. As we got closer to the village, 2 of us heard a female voice coming from the forest suddenly. We looked at each other, both realizing that we had heard it, while the third friend was talking and didn't notice. I instantly got goosebumps because it sounded real, and the fact that I wasn't the only one who had heard it made it even more creepier. We didn't say anything until we got back to the house, but here's where it gets even weirder. So, in Slavic folklore, there's not just the Leshy, the forest spirit who protects the woods and sometimes plays tricks on people, but also the Rusalka. Rusalki are these mythological female spirits often connected to lakes and rivers. They're usually described as beautiful women with long hair, sometimes said to lure people, especially at night, with their singing or their voices. We've been hanging out at this lake for so many nights, and then to hear mysterious female voices coming from the trees later on, near this said lake, it definitely made us wonder if we'd gotten a little bit too close to something supernatural. We still joke about those unhinged fireflies, but deep down we all know that we saw and heard something that we really cannot explain. Between the abandoned houses, the glowing eyes in the forest, and that eerie female voice, it was honestly one of the scariest and strangest experiences that I've ever had. And yes, I still think about those nights at the lake and wonder what might have been watching or listening to us out there in the darkness. So, to protect the building itself, an old hospital, since it still exists and is vacant, I won't share its name and I'll be vague on the location, but I can assure you that the story is true. So I've been an EMT going on 19 years, and in those years I worked for many a different ambulance agency. One agency that I worked for was a hospital-based 911 inter-facility ambulance provider. Bit of a mouthful, I know, but that's what it's called. Now, because it was owned and run by a hospital company, many of our stations were in the hospitals themselves. One of these hospitals was a small rural hospital in a very small town in New Jersey. Years ago, smaller hospital companies like the one that I worked for were struggling financially, and larger corporations came in to buy out the smaller ones. Now, when this company came in, it decided to close permanently this hospital, and it was a gradual closure, but it happened. First, they shut down medical floors and other services, but kept the ER open, but only during normal business hours. This too was shut down months later, and our station here was pretty much unaffected, and we had 24/7 access to this now empty human hospital. Well, this wasn't a full-time station of mine. I did work out there on a handful of occasions before they sold the building and moved the station elsewhere. Now, imagine a hospital empty of anyone, except one small office for an EMS crew. Everything was still in the hospital rooms and offices, obviously, just lacking humans. It was creepy having this building once full of life and energy, now silent and dormant. Anyways, I came in one morning and the ambulance crew that I would be relieving was out still. I get to the station at around 4:45 a.m. for a 5 a.m. clock-in time. It was my first time at this station, and like many other humans, I was curious about what this empty hospital was like. So, since I had a little bit of time, I started walking around the old hallway silent and sort of just admiring what the building once was. I walked into the old chapel, the ICU, and other areas briskly to not forget I'm actually there to work soon. The EMS office was also just located off of the main entrance and the waiting room. I'm walking back to this EMS office to punch in, and as I'm walking back, I swear that I start hearing whispering, clear as day whispering voices. At first, I couldn't tell where they were coming from until I started getting closer to the waiting room. They got louder, but they were still whispers, if that makes sense. I was thinking, okay, well, maybe the one security guard that they had staffed was sitting in there on a phone being silent or something. But as I walked into the dark waiting room, nothing. No one, and the voices suddenly stopped. I punched in, and not much of my time was spent there during the day, but days later I was working there again, and this time I'm working with somebody else who has also never worked there before. Like me, she was just as curious about the building, so I took her around the areas that I knew of and told her about what I had witnessed only a few days earlier. We were once again walking back to our office near the waiting room. We were just talking when she interrupts me and asks me if I heard something. I didn't, but the silence revealed what she was hearing. Once again, we start hearing whispering voices, clear voices, but not hearing what is being actually said. As we try to find the source this time, it was coming from an old office just outside of the waiting room. As we walked in, nothing. It was empty except for a desk, and the voices stopped again. It was amazing that I had someone there to tell me that I wasn't just hearing things this time and witnessed exactly what I did. After that, I unfortunately never had a chance to work out there again as the hospital got sold and the station was relocated elsewhere and all that. But this building still exists to this day, vacant and waiting for redevelopment, I suppose. Last time I drove by it, it was untouched, surprisingly. I'm going to start off by saying and acknowledging just how absurd I might sound to all of you. And look, I know that you might think that I'm fabricating this story for internet clout or something, but I want to assure you that I'm not. I know that I cannot force you to believe me, nor will I attempt to do so, but I'm going to share what happened during one summer in my youth. First, I'll explain why I believe this wasn't a mistaken memory or hallucination too. So my family has lived on our land for nearly 200 years now. We have taken care of this land and it has cared for us in turn. It is my ancestral home in a very real sense too. That said, our land has seen a few odd occurrences over the years for sure. I don't claim that our land is haunted or anything, but I do share my grandma's belief. She believes that our ancestors are looking down on us, protecting our family as a sort of guardian angel. It's a comforting feeling, at least to me, and I've never really felt unsafe on our land. My grandma has told me of some paranormal experiences that she has had over the years. Many occurred on our land, but one particularly relevant event to this story, it happened elsewhere. Now, during a cruise trip to the Caribbean, she and my grandpa were on shore on an island. My grandpa had gone ahead on a trail while my grandma had lagged behind a little bit, and as she was cresting a hill, a young girl ran up behind her. The child appeared to be scared of something, pointing to the bay and yelling that a ship is coming. My grandma tried to comfort the child, looking upwards towards the bay. She saw a sailing ship, like the ones from colonial times. The ship was far off, but she said that it was hard to discern, almost like a mirage. She said that she had called out to my grandpa before turning back to the child. However, when she turned back, the child was gone. No sound of her running off, no footprints, nothing. My grandma told me this story years ago, describing what she experienced as a bit of a time slip. an odd overlap of present and past that manifested in a, for a lack of a better term, ghost ship and child. I share this story to establish a bit of a history of odd occurrences that happened to some of our family members. It appears to be that more of them have occurred to me than my brother, despite us being pretty much inseparable when we were younger. But anyway, my time slip occurred during a summer when I was about 9 or 10. That summer, two friends had spent most weekdays with us as their mum had to work. Most days we would just play video games or explore the woods on our property or whatever. And it was on one of the days that we decided to explore when this event occurred. Our group of 4 were following my brother's dog. She was wandering through some game trails with us, making mild conversation, and we debated what would happen if we got lost. I said that we could eat some twigs and leaves, which solicited laughter from our group. After we walked through some brush, we came upon a fence line that I was familiar with but didn't see often. My memory then grows really hazy here. The others were with me, but they weren't involved in the time slip. My brother's dog had crossed the fence line, and I had followed despite the land that I was entering not being ours. I recall ducking under the middle strand of wire, and when I came up, the woods, they had just vanished. Obviously, as you can imagine, I was very confused, as anyone would be. I looked around for our dog, but I couldn't find her. I did notice, however, how similar the scene before me looked. It was a fenced clearing that was an acre in size. I recognized the acre-sized clearing where my home should have sat, and I was puzzled as to what I was even looking at. The fence looked much newer, and the 3 mesquite trees were nothing more than saplings. The windmill creaked with the wind, but a blade that was broken my entire life was now undamaged. The sun shone a little brighter than normal. The entire time I felt sort of dazed, like in a lucid dream almost. After a few moments, I got an uncanny feeling and decided to turn back. And when I crossed back, I turned and saw the woods had returned to normal. I cannot recall much after that, but that would simply be due to the event happening over a decade ago, I suppose. I know in some cultures that crossing a boundary of some kind could result in crossing over into another dimension or whatever. Though far-fetched, it could be another explanation besides a time slip, I guess, but despite trying to replicate the event, I have thus far been unable to. I wonder if anyone else has experienced this phenomenon and could possibly shed some light on what the heck it is that I encountered. This might be a bit of a long one, so please bear with me. When I was 9 years old, my best friend Matt's parents offered to take us and his 2 younger siblings to a place called Discovery Zone in the next city over, about 40 minutes away. We had dinner afterwards and then headed back to our town, where I would sleep over at Matt's house. We lived in a part of the east side of town that was pretty rough, and there was a large swath of undeveloped land between the main road and the entrance to our neighborhood. On either side of the access road, between the two, were prairies overgrown with brush and weeds, and really nothing to speak of for maybe about half a mile in any direction at that time. Matt, his older brother, and sister were crashed out, and I was awake looking out of the window of the red Chrysler minivan that we were riding in. Now, it's important to note that as a kid, I was afraid of everything. I really mean that too. I used to turn off the light and sprint up the stairs. I used to sleep with the covers all the way over my head, leaving only a small opening for air, and I wouldn't even dream of watching a horror movie. So as I'm looking out of the window into the empty prairie on the right, that was when I see her, clearer than should have been possible thanks to the moonlight, a tall, frail woman, hunched over a bit, with long, thin, stringy hair. Everything about her was spindly, and I couldn't even tell that she was soaking wet, as if she'd just come out of a river or something. Then, as I fixated on her, she stopped walking and turned her head, and she saw me. As she raised her head to look at me, I realized that it wasn't a woman's head on her body, but that of like a horse or something, whose white hair was made grey and muddy by the water and the dirt. Not only that too, and although I couldn't see it perfectly, I knew that the horse's eyes were cloudy and milky, blind with age or disease perhaps. Now, here's the strange bit though. I wasn't afraid of her. In my mind, a voice was telling me that it was okay, that I had seen her and she had seen me now, and I didn't have to be afraid. My family and I are from Mexico, and I grew up in the Southwest, so I immediately equated what I saw with La Llorona, who all of us kids had heard of as a cautionary tale to get our butts inside before it got too late or too dark. I never told a soul about seeing her, and I never really thought about her again too. That is, until March of 2020. Now, during the COVID shutdowns, I spent a lot of time online, and much of that was on certain paranormal message boards. They used to be cool. One afternoon, I was scrolling through endless threads there when one caught my attention. Share your scary or paranormal experiences about Mexico. Reading through each of them was actually pretty fun, until I came upon this one from a guy who used to date a girl from Mexico. Her uncle owned a mango grove there, and while the guy and his girlfriend were walking through it one day, he kept noticing an old woman ducking behind the trees. Finally, he asked the girlfriend who the lady was, and she turned to look, just catching a glance of her. The girl grabbed her boyfriend by the wrist and instantly took off running without a word until they got back to the house. She breathlessly told her uncle that there had been an old witch spying on them, and that when she looked at her, the woman had a white horse head in place of her own. Upon reading that, every hair on my body was standing up, but it was the attached comment from another user that made my blood truly run cold. You see, his father and his friend had been partying in Mexico one night when they were young men, and were driving back when they saw a young girl walking along the side of the road with her back to them, hunched over. She was dripping with water, so they stopped to see if she was okay. When they approached her, she turned to face them, and they just took off sprinting back to the car because, again, she had a white horse head, and the friend said that its eyes were milky, clouded, and blind. Now, I could accept the argument that whatever I saw as a kid was just pure imagination, but how is it that I imagined the exact same woman that these guys saw? I looked for any precedent for La Llorona having a horse head and came up with nothing, but fast forward another few years when I went to Universal Studios Hollywood Horror Nights, and they had a La Llorona-themed haunted house, and wouldn't you know it, they gave her a skinned, bloody horse head. My husband, 23 and male, and I, 22 and female, have been on our wedding anniversary for over a week now. We have a camper in Cherokee, North Carolina that we've been staying in. We have an interest in abandoned things like towns and cemeteries and whatnot. So we decided that we would go and visit Connor Cemetery. It's near Couches Creek off of Newfound Gap Road, which is about 1.9 from the visitor center. Anyway, when we arrive to pull off close to where the trailhead is supposed to be, we get out and start walking towards the opening in the woods where there is a trail. The trail itself is visible, but you would have to be looking for it to see it. We're walking in, heading towards where the cemetery is supposed to be. I'm in the front looking down, checking for snakes and holes, and my husband is behind me. We've paused for a second, and he said, "Hey babe, look at that statue." I start looking around and say where, and he points to the direction. What I was expecting was like an angel statue that you would normally see in cemeteries. But that is not what this was. I look upwards further up the trail, and off to the side is what looks to be a 12 to 15 foot tall deer or elk statue. The statue looks like it was either made up of wood or wrapped in leather hide and looked preserved almost. The problem is that nowhere online had it mentioned this statue or anything of this sort. It starts giving me this uneasy feeling because it had a strange face and it was just a very weird place for something like that to be there. My husband then said that he didn't like the look at it at all and we should probably go. As soon as he said that, we turned around and left as fast as we could. Once we got back to our car, I told him that it just didn't feel right at all. He agreed with me and said that he saw a deer-like face with a snout and he thinks that he actually saw it blink and its right ear had moved, but not like a normal animal ear, but a full-on 360 rotation. I told him that what I saw was like an elk body with a camel mixed with an elk-like face. On the way back to our camper, I started thinking that I should have taken a picture of it, but unfortunately I just didn't think to do it at the time. Once we were back at the camper, we started researching things and we just could not find where this was ever listed or ever even seen before. We decided to go back to a local Native American bookstore that we had gone to previously and speak to the older lady who runs it there. We'd explained what had happened and she advised us to speak to the visitor center in the national park to see if anyone had something similar or if they knew of any native stories of something similar to this. She had also said that sometimes the things choose for you to be the only ones to see it. We had thanked the lady and then we left back to our camper. Now I'm here with all of you guys and thinking about what we may have possibly seen out there in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere. If you have any information on what this could be, then please do let me know. We'll be going to the visitor center tomorrow and most likely we'll be going back into the woods to see if it's still there or not. My hunch is that it won't be. I'll start off by saying that this isn't the first time that I've experienced something paranormal. I've actually shared another story here before, but this one, oh boy. So the first event took place on my birthday. I had this stoner friend who did drugs all the time and gave me a hardcore LSD square. I, being a complete idiot, thought that it would make for a good birthday, so I just put the whole thing on my tongue and started sucking on it like it was prime Angelina Jolie's lips or something. My friend starts telling me that I'd have to wait about an hour for it to start kicking in and how the trip would sort of feel like, and he's telling me all this stuff and I start feeling like my stomach's being drilled all of a sudden. The room that I was in immediately shrank and it felt like I was going to choke. I tell him about it and he says, "Oh, it's probably kicking in already because it's your first time and you took the whole thing." So we get out of the apartment and sit in a garden outside of the building. It must have been like 8 p.m. by then. And while I'm sitting there, everything that had a texture became alive and it was really nice. The walls with tiny rocks on them, plants, all of it. My friend also put on some music and I was enjoying it. Little did I know. At this point, I start seeing people bursting in like flames. It was like a fire or something would flow from within each person that I saw, but it was different for everybody. Some people would come up to me and I would start having trouble breathing, and other people would have this beautiful soothing light coming from them that would calm my nerves. I was super sensitive at that moment. And it's kind of funny that I found it hilarious, I guess. Anyway, my friend and I started walking to a little bar to get a couple of beers. He stopped in the way to greet a dude, and I swear that I could suddenly read his thoughts. Like, I would know what he wanted to say before he even said it, and then he would. I started getting a bit nervous, but I expressed it with complete and utter silence. But when we arrived at the bar, I started hearing voices. They would repeat old conversations that I had heard when I was a little kid and completely forgotten about. Like me being a 2-year-old and hearing my mum talk to a neighbor about God and how she felt that we were abandoned in this world. Every word, every sentence in fact, hundreds of forgotten conversations flooded my head suddenly, and I would know why and when they were talking about those things. Amid this madness and psychosis, I could recognize a pattern in these memories. They were all dialogues that discredited God in some way or another. But as soon as I became aware of that, I started feeling like I was being pulled from my own body forcefully. I started freaking out, but my friend literally left me sitting by myself because he went to do something in the bathroom. And look, I know, what do you mean by being pulled out from your own body, right? Let me put it this way. So, you are your personality, right? Your thoughts, your feelings, memories, dreams, your soul, I guess you could say. That was what I felt was being taken away from me, and the more that I felt I was no longer in control, the more I would feel like I was losing my mind, like going crazy, never to return to myself ever again. Upon that realization, everything became visual too. I saw a literal bunch of figures all around the bar that I was at. Some were sitting next to people who were just having a good time. Others were vibing and singing loudly to Viva La Vida by Coldplay. These figures, though, they were all black, and the only thing that I could notice in them was these red glowing eyes. But just before I completely lost my mind, I guess you could say, I heard another voice, but it wasn't in my head. It was like coming from within me almost. Leave this place. Something bad is about to happen. You don't belong here, my son. In perfect Spanish, which is my native language. That voice obliterated every other voice that I was hearing, and I immediately stopped feeling what I described a while ago. My friend had already come back, and so I grabbed him by his shirt. I said to him, something bad is about to happen, let's get the heck out of here. And he went, nah man, you're just horror tripping. I knew that this was going to happen. And as he's yapping along, we suddenly hear people screaming and a flying bottle passed right between us and crashed against the wall that we were sitting next to. Then a huge fight broke out due to some drunk, dangerous people that happened to be there or something. My friend was terrified and started running out of the bar suddenly. We got out of there as quickly as we could, and as we were walking back to his house, he asked how I knew that was going to happen. While my brain was, well, just malfunctioning, he said. But it was way too much to take in at that time. I didn't understand anything that had happened. Eventually, I came down from the trip and things started to become clear. I was no longer high, and I mean, I had practically been high all my life, and for the first time I was completely lucid. But I saw, I heard, and I felt it. And at that moment I felt like God was real, and I had felt him for the first time in my entire life. I mean, it couldn't have been anything else to me. I just knew. A week passed, and I'm in my room, and I decide to get on my knees and pray. I said that if he was really listening, that I wanted him to send somebody who could teach me how to look for him, how to connect with him, and if he did, that I would never walk away from him. The next day, I heard somebody knocking on my door at 6 p.m. I went to see who it was, and it's a neighbor that I had seen before, but I didn't really know him or talk to him very much. Hi neighbor, God bless you. I'm just stopping by to invite you to a Bible reading at my house. He named his house and street. It's the first Bible reading of many that will come, so I hope you'll join us. There'll be snacks and everything. My eyes watered instantly, and I said yes. And a little over a year has passed since then, and although I'm not a very religious person, I guess you could say, I do have a relationship with God, and I can 100% affirm that my heart has changed a lot since that time. I'm certainly still flawed in many ways, but I am a completely different person and carry a very different life than the one that I used to. This was a very personal experience, as you can probably imagine, and I've been trying to get this off my chest for a while now. Sort of give my testimony, I guess. Obviously, you can take it or leave it. It's the same for me. I mean, it's out now, so that's that. But still, my advice would be, don't go anywhere near drugs, especially LSD and hard stuff. And also, be aware that there are some dark things out there. Dark things like I saw at the bar. Things that I wish that I had never seen. And may God bless you all. My uncle and his family had multiple generations grow up in the same house. It was a beautiful 3-story Queen Anne Victorian home built in the 1890s by his great-grandfather. His family owned it up until about the 70s. It has changed hands outside of the family until about the 90s, after my uncle was able to purchase it, after establishing his own successful architectural firm. Multiple people in his family from earlier generations died in that house in the early 1900s. Some from natural causes, a couple from diseases, scarlet fever and typhoid. But as soon as my uncle moved in, strange things started happening. Cabinets in the kitchen would be open when nobody was home, phantom footsteps were heard, and the weirdest thing, knocks on the door in the middle of the night and no one would be there. One of these instances of knocking on the front door to no one being there, my uncle got a call the next morning from his dad saying that his great-uncle, who had lived in the house as a kid, had actually died the night before, around the same time as the knock was heard. My own experience in the house was when I was in my late teen years. My uncle's family was out of town and they asked if I could sit the dogs for them. I always looked forward to it because the house was huge and they had a massive pool in the backyard to enjoy. But I also sort of secretly dreaded it too because the house was just really damn creepy at night. Old furniture, old family pictures, old light fixtures, straight out of a haunted house movie, really. Well, one night when I was getting ready to go to bed on the second floor, the dogs suddenly perked up, which was strange to me. They all came into the same room that I was in and sat, staring out into the hallway on alert. Shortly after, I heard the sound of distinct footsteps coming down the hallway of the 3rd floor above, and then footsteps down the stairs to my floor. I was frozen in fear suddenly. The footsteps stopped about halfway down the stairs, and not another sound was heard for the rest of the night. But I didn't sleep a wink that night. The last part of this story happened a few years ago, though, after they moved out of the house to downsize. The new owner called my uncle a month after moving in. After some cordial conversation, the new owner asked my uncle, "This might be weird, but did you have anything strange happen to you in the house?" My uncle responded, "Well, yes, when we first moved in, but what exactly do you mean?" The new owner explained that he was having some work done on the 3rd floor and he hired some painters to repaint some of the walls. The new owner left the house to run a quick errand and came back to all the painters sitting outside on the front porch looking concerned. When the new owner asked what was going on, one of the painters said, "Mister, we are not going back in there. There's something on the 3rd floor and we cannot figure it out." The painter elaborated that one of his workers was by himself on the 3rd floor, and he felt a distinct touch of a hand on his shoulder. When he turned around expecting one of his painting buddies to be there, no one was there. The third thing that happened to the new owner too was that his brother came to stay the night one night. He was set up on the 3rd floor, and when the new owner woke up the next morning, he found his brother asleep on the couch on the 1st floor. He asked his brother why he had changed rooms like this, and his brother had said that, "You're not going to believe this, but when I was getting ready for bed, I was putting away some clothes, and it felt like someone touched my shoulder, but when I turned around, nobody was there." My uncle responded to those stories saying, "Oh yeah, don't worry, those are just my old family members welcoming you to the home. They'll get used to you after a while." I'm not so sure that was reassuring for the new owner or not, but in any case, that place is probably now haunted by my own family, and that's weird to think about. I want to start this by stating that before I moved to Oregon, or this house, I did not truly believe in the paranormal. I just thought of ghost stories as like entertainment, really. But now, I am a firm believer. In 2018, I moved into Central Oregon. I moved into the attic of a house that was built around 1840. I was a broke college student, and it was a great deal on rent. The other girls who lived in the house warned me, though, that strange things happened, but I just brushed it off, really. In the beginning, it was just small things, like the second-story balcony door being wide open in the mornings, but still deadbolt locked. Chairs from the first floor appearing on the second floor. Honestly, I just thought that it was my roommates messing with each other. Then comes Thanksgiving. So I'm the only one of 12 roommates to stay home for the holiday. I woke up and the house was freezing, so I sort of padded downstairs to turn up the thermostat. As I'm pressing the buttons, I suddenly hear two women talking. I stop pressing the buttons to listen to see who's home, and I hear one say he's coming, and I sort of immediately forgot everything else that they said. I wandered around the house, though, trying to find who's home, but there was no one. It was just me. I spend the rest of the day trying to shake it off. I mean, it must have been from how exhausted I was. At night, I'm sitting on the couch in the living room with my roommate's kitten on my lap, petting her, and all of a sudden she goes sort of rigid in my lap. And I look up and I see a shadow on the window. Inky black, like it was there on the glass and not a reflection or someone outside. I stare at it for a moment and feel it looking back at me. Then it moves across the glass and disappears. I call my only friend who was still in town, and she comes over. After this, stranger things started happening too. Like when I would go into the basement, I would always feel eyes on me. One night, my roommate sees a man in what we call the catacombs. It's a sort of weird zigzagging hallway that leads from the main basement to the basement apartment. She calls the police, but they cannot find anyone. In the attic, my bed is in a sort of triangle-shaped room, and at night it always sounds like someone's dragging their fingernails down it above my head. Things go missing in the house. All the fish in my roommate's fish tank suddenly die one night. I hear whispers all over the house, unable to pick up what they're saying or where they're coming from exactly. One day my roommates went out of a room through a window that doesn't lock, and they could not get back inside as the window was like suddenly stuck. They were trapped out there for hours until I came home and heard them yelling. The weird thing though is that I opened it easily and couldn't understand how they were stuck like that. Well, once the lease ended, we all decided to move out. I swore to never go back, but I often feel drawn to that house for some weird reason. If I'm out walking, I'll stand outside of it and I'll sort of just stare into the window of what used to be my room. Last night I was home alone, and before anyone says anything, yes, the police were contacted and investigated and all of that. So, like I said, I was home alone last night. My parents were out at an event with some friends, so I had to stay home and watch the house. Not long after they left, I drove to a Subway to just grab some food before heading home. To be honest, I'm not an easily scared person or anything like that. But I don't know, I get such an off, empty feeling when I'm home alone because I never feel like I'm quite alone, I guess. Anyway, after eating my food, I watched some TV in the living room for a bit. But then I heard sounds from upstairs. They sounded like light footsteps, kind of. I paused the TV and listened for a bit. The footsteps stopped. Not to sound too corny or full of myself, but I'm a little bit built and won't go down without a fight, so I gathered my courage to head upstairs, but of course with a knife, because I'm not dumb enough to leave myself open like that. I checked the hole upstairs and no one was there. And yes, I checked all the closets, under the beds, and everywhere someone could be hiding, and there was no one. I let out a small exhale of relief because if I did end up finding someone, then I really wasn't ready for what that would have looked like. It was getting pretty late anyway, so I switched the living room TV off, locked the house up all right, and made sure nothing was unlocked, including all of the windows, and then went to my room and watched some TV there. Everything was fine too until I heard light knocking. I looked around to see where it would be coming from, but my bedroom door was open and my closet door is built in a certain way that no one could possibly fit in there since it has like shelves, not an open space. I examined the house again and still nothing. Honestly, I was getting a little bit annoyed now. I went back into my room, but then heard someone calling me. It sounded so much like my dad's voice, and I sort of knew that it was because my dad has a thick Italian accent with a deep tone, so it definitely sounded exactly like him, but it was so weird because I didn't hear my parents come home. I was about to check it out too before realizing that every time that he called my name, it sounded exactly the same, almost like his voice had been recorded or something and just played over and over again. My heart absolutely sunk when I realized what presence that I was in. I quickly shut my door, and since it doesn't have a lock, I blocked it with my unit. I called my parents and they contacted the police. Police showed up about 10 minutes later from the station not being far from my house. I checked out of my window to make sure it was actually the police before heading downstairs and opening the door. I reported everything to them, and they told me that they would patrol the area after searching my house top to bottom, and no one was found. There was no break-in in the end because nothing was stolen. No doors or windows were unlocked or broken or anything, and apparently it wasn't a person. Which leaves me thinking that it was a mimic. In fact, I know it was. I've heard plenty of stories and seen dozens of clips of mimics being caught on camera. I didn't sleep last night, even after my parents came home. I was just so on edge because I know if I left my room from fully believing that it was my dad that I probably wouldn't be here anymore. This happened about 2 to 3 months ago. So I have a backyard area behind my house. It's actually just cement driveway with bushes, trees, and such off to the sides, really. But sometimes I take my dogs out there for a quick pee if a long walk is not due. So I'm out there with one of my dogs, probably at around 11 p.m. or 12 a.m., and he's sniffing around and peeing a bit, when all of a sudden I hear it. A voice, loud as heck. Almost sounds like he has a microphone speaker or something, and it's projected directly towards me. And for the next 25 seconds, this thing is absolutely yelling something at me. I don't know what he or it said. It was for sure not in English. I don't think it was Latin, and to be perfectly honest, it didn't sound like any language that I'd ever heard. But it was for sure a language. It spoke really loud and so distinctly that it was definitely an intelligent being. Now, for the first couple of seconds, my brain was overloading thinking, what the heck? Then I immediately think to record the sound. I didn't see anything, but I remember that I felt like my phone was inside because it was almost zero battery, and the next thought that I have is, this must be some sort of a prank or speakers or something. I mean, there is a building next door, but it's literally a retirement home, and in 20 years of living here, I've never heard anything, not even a TV playing from any of their windows, let alone something as loud as this. And then this happened. The voice sounded like it was coming from a 12-foot to 500-pound creature. That's how loud and strong it sounded. But nothing was there that you could see. and the moment that I thought that it must be speakers in some movie scene or something, I kid you not, the source of the sound went back and forth like the entire length of their yard. It was moving, back and forth, still talking to me, just maybe 10 feet away, way closer than the building itself. I concluded then that it was not a speaker, at least not from that building. The other crazy thing is that my dog was barking like crazy from where this voice was coming from. My dog never barks at hardly anything, especially in that scenario with just us two sort of chilling outside like that. Honestly, I cannot stop thinking of what it was. I think it was alien or something of that sort. A friend that I told who believes me thinks that it was demonic, but either way, as scary as it was in that moment, I also think, wow, that was really interesting and sort of cool. After the fact, of course. The thing's voice sounded malicious though, for sure. And if real, it's probably something that could have crushed me like we can crush an insect. So that fact really does not give me any sort of peace. This happened back in August of 2014 while I was dealing with a rough transition in my life. This happened in the middle of the night, but I'm going to tell the whole story of that whole day so that you can get a better understanding as to why it's all just so crazy. As if seeing an evil entity isn't crazy enough, right? Anyway, that day in August of 2014, I had been 4 months into a recovery program healing from an addiction that I am still free of to this day. During my time at the program, I got warnings for talking during work. During the day, we worked in a warehouse that distributed donations to a big chain thrift store. During my shift that day, I got caught talking to a male resident, which was a huge no-no at this program. So because I got in trouble for the 3rd or 4th time, I unfortunately got kicked out of the program. They opened the back door and out I went. No cell phone or money. We pretty much worked for snacks at that time. I went into a liquor store and asked to use the phone, where I made plans to have my stepdad pick me up from the train station that day. I waited there for about 4 hours since I had to wait until he was done with what he had already planned, giving me plenty of time to think on my life decisions and really what I should do next. He finally arrived though, unhappy with me as expected. I sat in what would be my new room for the next couple of months feeling defeated and honestly just exhausted. It finally came time though to get some rest and I fell asleep pretty quickly. I started to dream that I was in a place that I loved as a child called Color Me Mine, but it was also a coffee shop of sorts. I sat at a table with no coffee or clay to paint, just sitting there, noticing that it was only me and a middle-aged woman who was working there. She was sweeping the floor and suddenly stopped and said, "So, Sarah, what are you going to do now that you got kicked out of treatment?" Even though this was a dream, I remember feeling shocked that she knew my name and such personal information. As I was thinking about how to answer her question, there was suddenly a deafening scream. The scream wasn't of terror though, it was of pure anger. The woman was just looking at me with no expression on her face while this scream was happening around us. It terrified me so badly, in fact, that I ended up waking up, but the weirdest thing is that I was still hearing this scream. It faded out and I was waiting for one of my parents to come to my room and ask what the heck that was about, but they never did. And just as quickly as the scream faded, I suddenly felt a presence to the left of my bed. That was when I noticed, standing there in front of the window, there was this entity. It looked like an angry, sickly, and demonic old woman. She was staring daggers at me and her mouth was open as if she were snarling. I was definitely awake at this point, and to this day I still know that I was awake. I looked right back at her and started praying. Since I had come out of a Christian-based program, It was honestly all that I could think to do at the time. Then she slowly faded away, and as she was, her expression softened, but was still full of hatred. Then she was gone. I sat there looking around my room. I'm not sure why, but I didn't feel scared after that. I laid back down and just went back to sleep. The next morning, I was making coffee with my mum and telling her about what I had experienced. She tried to tell me that it was all just a dream, even though I thought that I was awake after sitting up from hearing that scream that I'll never forget. She was sure, though, that the whole thing was a dream, not just the part up until the scream woke me up. But I know that at that moment that I sat up, still hearing that scream, that I was wide awake. I heard that scream still happening when I sat right up before I saw that evil thing as well. It's been over 10 years now, and I have never and will never forget it. Sometimes I think that that entity was angry because I was still determined to fight and better my life or something. I felt like the anger and the hatred that it gave off was because it wanted me to give up and wanted me to suffer. But instead I chose to fight. And now I am living an amazing life.